I want to thank our host, the Ambassador of Bulgaria, and I want to thank you for coming out and being with us today. As the chairperson said, I'm from a different region, the Caribbean, and I didn't bring any pictures because I didn't want to make you jealous. Because you're stuck in this cold place and there's so much sun and sunshine and sand, and we have rum and Coca-Cola too, but I didn't bring any. Today I'm going to be a little bit lighter, and let me say that if you notice, I'm from the 6th region of Africa, part of the African diaspora. But all I did, this is Black History Month, and I just stuck to the head tie because if I came in full regalia, you'd want to know why I'm going to see Black Panther in the middle of the day. So our topic today is a very interesting one, promoting global collaboration, unity, and peace through cultural diplomacy. That's the theme. And I've decided to talk about global divisions, cultural cohesion. We live in an era where regional and locally concentrated conflicts with seemingly no concrete resolutions appear to be the rule rather than the exception. I am here today because I am confident that we do have an arsenal that requires no bullets, necessitates the commandeering of no bombs, and deployment of no weapons of mass destruction. Our arsenal is culture. By acknowledging, embracing, and respecting all our diverse cultures, we can change the global dynamic and create real and lasting change. We must look no further than what we all have in common: sports, music, and our varying culinary practices, to name but a few. Before we look at the solutions to our problems, we must first try to define what cultural diplomacy really means. What is culture? Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines culture as the customary beliefs, social forms, and material traits of a racial, religious, or social group. If we accept this definition of culture, then we must accept that all cultures have equal value, that there is no supreme or right culture that should be forced upon any race, people, or nation. In other words, there is no such thing as a cultural hegemony. Now, what is diplomacy? Diplomacy, as we know it, can be defined as the art and practice of conducting negotiations between nations. This is a rather vague definition, but the premise is clear. Good diplomacy would not lead to conflict, but rather two or more parties coming to the table to find solution for the issues of the day. We can therefore conclude that cultural diplomacy is the coordinated use of one's group's materials, beliefs, habits, and traits to influence other groups in a respectful and sensitive manner. To influence, not to coerce, to influence in a respectful and sensitive manner. This has been happening for centuries, although not thus defined in as comprehensive a discipline. Yet unfortunately, down through the ages, movement of peoples across geographic lines have not always been positive, but have often brought hardship, subjugation, and destruction to indigenous peoples. To quote Koheleth, the teacher, a wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a faithful ambassador brings health. That's from the book of Proverbs. I left it out initially. I didn't bring the quote, but since he says that I did the theology, I said, okay, maybe it's okay. If our theme is to be honored, and that's the theme, ICD's theme, that we spoke about, collaboration for unity and peace. If our theme is to be honored, if the world's aspirations of attaining the Sustainable Development Goals, which are based on the well-being of people, planet, peace, prosperity, and partnerships, we must all strive to be faithful cultural diplomats. A faithful diplomat, as faithful diplomats, or arsenal must employ all cultural forms, including indigenous foods, music, art, sports, and education, as we seek to utilize every tool at our disposal to foster friendship and to build caring communities of peace and unity. Today, I would like to focus on two main areas of cultural diplomacy, because I think they hold tremendous potential for the attainment of unity and peace. Firstly, I wish to talk about sports. The world recently turned a spotlight on the Winter Olympics to see the surprising spectacle of North and South Korea marching together in the opening ceremony as one Korea. Through the medium of sports diplomacy, similarities between a people who share one geographic space was celebrated, taking precedence over their differences. The Olympics has also nurtured many a cultural diplomat. Anyone knows who is Michael Phelps? Usain Bolt? Well, these I consider cultural diplomats. They not only inspire youth around the globe to emulate their feats, but they highlight the importance of healthy lifestyles essential to the success of every one of us. Magic Johnson, do you know who is Magic Johnson, or am I dating myself? Magic Johnson pioneered the fight against stigma and discrimination, as well as inspiring hope for longevity for persons infected with HIV and AIDS. Once Magic Johnson came on the scene, we knew who Magic Johnson was. We started to look at HIV/AIDS globally in a different light. And as he lived longer and longer, we started to understand that it is not a death sentence. These are things and these are ways I think cultural diplomats can shift the thinking globally. And then there's Venus Williams, and many of you, some of you do know Jackie Joyner Kersee. Most know Venus Williams. Jackie Joyner Kersee was a famous hepathlete. Both are examples to the world of perseverance and excellence in performance despite living with chronic diseases. Jackie Joyner Kersee had severe asthma, and Venus Williams, of course, has Sjogren's syndrome. These are but a few of the many cultural sports ambassadors who inspire our youth and establish bonds and bridges around the world as we celebrate with them their successes, often in spite of many setbacks. As a Caribbean Afro-descendant, one might expect that music would be my other area of focus, given the importance of my ancestral communication by drums. Of course, the Caribbean is known for its carnivals and festivals and dancing. Lighter note. Among our musical cultural diplomats is the little-known Black Stallion, a Trinidadian calypsonian whose composition, The Caribbean Man, has become almost an anthem across the region. The song reminds us that we are one race, from the same place. We took the same trip, on the same trip. We took the same ship on the same trip. So we must seek one common intention. It's for a better life for the region. This song, of course, sent a message to the politicians who were unable to save the West Indies Federation. In fact, he said, Mr. Politician, all of you went to university, you have education, and how come you can unite 7 million? He says, if the West Indies Federation dying and Calypso still thriving, so it's something the Calypsonians doing that the politicians don't know. He reminded us that culture can often do what politicians cannot. Much more famous is another unforgettable Caribbean cultural diplomat, Robert Nesta Marley, better known as Bob Marley, right, Jamaican reggae superstar. Bob Marley captivated a global audience with the words, one love. What about one heart? One heart, he says, I'm pleading to mankind. One love. And I'm sure some of you know that song, One Love. I won't sing it. This call to recognize the oneness of Homo sapiens echoes the sentiments of the young Barack Obama, who said to his sister Alma, we are of one race, the human race. Yet despite globalization and technological advancements which have brought increased participation in trade, travel, and communication, statistics have shown a decline in empathy towards one another over the past 40 years. And I just heard the chairman mention that someone spoke about empathy. Furthermore, with the rise of populism and nationalism, that trend is likely to continue. That is, the decline of empathy, unless we adopt new and emerging solutions to old and vexing problems. Could it be that by facing global crises with cultural solutions, rather than political actions, which seek to force and demand outward change, we might encourage change from within? Could cultural diplomacy become a device to persuade us to listen with our hearts, despite differences in color, class, or religious creed? If so, we can certainly change the trajectory of empathy, without which we will struggle to love our neighbor, who is every other citizen of the planet which we inhabit, and of which we are admonished to be good stewards. Additionally, this change of the empathy trajectory is necessary lest we enshrine ourselves within our selective social bubbles. And in fact, the news media, Facebook, the things we listen to just encourage us to stay within our bubbles rather than reach out in empathy and understanding of others. Bob Marley's voice is still calling from the grave. His redemption song, Songs of Freedom, as well as No Woman, No Cry, bring a message of solace, hope, and endurance to the millions of women around the world who have been kidnapped, sold into sexual slavery, endure forced marriages, and who suffer more subtle indignities of gender discrimination. He croons from his grave to the Me Too movement, little darling, don't shed no tears. Everything's gonna be all right. With United Nations global statistics illustrating that when women are empowered and involved, governments are more honest and transparent, countries are more prosperous, and peace more enduring. This song is a fillip to the promotion of gender inclusiveness and collaboration in the pursuit of global unity and peace. As I close, it would be remiss of me not to focus on a small part that my own country has played towards building the world's arsenal of cultural diplomacy. In 1754, a captain by the name of Alexander Cluny encountered a slave ship captain on the island of St. Kitts. As a result of that memorable encounter, Alexander Cluny became the spiritual advisor to that slave trader who would later become an Anglican priest and penned the words which would become the world's most famous hymn. Imagine the resonance of these words with genocide sufferers from Rohingya to overcomers from Rwanda, war refugees from Syria to Sudan, climate refugees from Dominica to Africa, victims of terrorism from Florida to France. The enslaved, the dispossessed, the impoverished all over the planet could associate themselves with the words, "Through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have already come. 'Tis grace has brought me safe thus far, and grace will lead me home." That former slave trader turned abolitionist is none other than John Newton, author of the hymn, Amazing Grace. Some of you may know that hymn, it may be the first time you heard it, when President Barack Obama so plaintively pulled the cords of the hearts of a grieving church in Charleston, South Carolina, after yet another massacre of innocent lives. Yes, cultural diplomacy has lots of weapons in its arsenal, weapons that shed no blood, but rather emphasize equality, encourage respect, change lives from the inside, thus promoting unity and peace globally. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Ambassador, for your indeed inspiring speech, putting cultural diplomacy in the context of all humanitarian issues that we are dealing, and that is indeed what diplomacy is about, and cultural diplomacy particularly. So, does anyone? Yes, please.
Yes, thanks. Yes, thanks.
My name is Rahmat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, do you see any values, universal values for culture in the world?
I think so, in fact, that I may be biased because I'm not a diplomat, as we say it, or in this context. As he said, I'm a doctor, and so lives, the value of life is really important to me. And I think as I look at the world, I see so much going on, so much going on. And I believe part of the problem, I stress empathy, because I think the command that we are given, which we most ignore, is to love one another. And I see it in that context. One of my favorite sayings, and my assistant might be tired of hearing me say it, is by Woodrow Wilson, that we are all citizens of this world, and the tragedy of our age is that we don't know it. I think it is so relevant today. And I believe if we begin to see ourselves as citizens of this world, sharing one common space, we ought to be able to take care of that space in terms of the climate, yes, and we ought to be good neighbors, or the command to be good neighbors to each other. I don't think the politicians really can do that. Because I don't think they speak to the heart, the way music does, the way sports does, the way sharing a meal does. So I think these are the things, the cultural aspects have to be emphasized. If you meet and you share, I mean, one of the things we're told as a woman, you're walking on the street at night and you see a man on the other side and you're afraid, call out to him, speak to him. Once you engage, there's something in the human psyche. Once you engage with the other person, it's very different. You see them in a totally different light. And so we ought to be able to reach out to each other. And music, art, they are powerful ways to reach each other. And I think these things ought to be emphasized. And just like in Korea, focus on what brings us together, the similarities and not the differences. And I think that is really better for the world. Yes, yeah.
Our Swedish voice.
Yes.
I didn't say voice of Sweden. That's Swedish voice.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Eric, thank you.
You emphasized on something I have been longing to hear about empathy.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that despite for our globalized and digitalized world, we still insist on these encounters, human to human.
Mm-hmm.
Like this today, like the purpose of the Academy of Cultural Diplomacy to face the other culture
Mm-hmm.
and to absorb what the other culture has to give us in order to negotiate.
Yes.
Conflict or discussion or whatever. Another aspect was the history. You kept telling us in Italian and being very global, the history of slavery, oppression, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But what I find it very difficult sometimes is that many of the countries like yours and others have managed to carry on the historic baggage and yet build a future. But we have sometimes to face and hear many heads of states in many African countries, for instance, blaming all their failure, all the failure in their countries on slavery.
Mm-hmm.
Take Mugabe, for instance. He ruined Zimbabwe with all this, and he convinced the people that this is the reason. This is why we are failing. Instead of saying, I'm not good in governance anymore. We should have new, fresh people. No, he blamed everything on history and slavery. Do you think this is a mechanism, a
Okay.
strategy for certain leaders to escape?
Okay.
Because we heard from Ambassador, your colleague, about how they have their history in the Balkan states.
Yes.
How they project the future.
Yes.
They want to go beyond, they want to
Yes.
go over.
Yes.
One that did, for instance.
Yes.
But still, is it a mechanism? Can you elaborate this? And one
Okay.
more issue.
Okay.
How do you
Okay.
relate on the Me Too in your country?
Okay.
That Me
Okay. Okay. So the first one was just a comment, and yeah, empathy is very important to me because, like I say, I believe in love, but I believe you can't truly love in that agape type thing unless you're able to empathize, put yourself in the other people's shoes, walk a mile in shoes, understand where they're coming from. In terms of blaming slavery, I look at it this way. The first person, I must look at myself. So if I'm going to blame, look in the mirror. The first, I must take responsibility. However, history is important. I don't think if we don't understand where we're coming from, we don't know where we are going. So I believe we have been done an injustice in the sense that if you look at the Jews, for example, the 6 million Jews, and they talk about it, and they talk about the history, and we allow them to celebrate that history. They use that history, though, to motivate them as a people. I think that for too long, for some reason, maybe for whatever reason, we were not allowed much to talk about that history, maybe when we should have. been allowed to talk about, because it's not 6 million. It's not 6 million. The estimates are 12 million, but if you look at the population of Africa in the 200 years between 16 and 18, it stayed stagnant when the population of Asia and Europe grew. And for black people, we know it remained stagnant, some things. And although that was not the only slave trade, it was the most significant slave trade. So I do think we need to, and even the biblical scriptures tell you, teach your history to the children, understand your history, hand it down, but don't use it to embitter you. So I don't think we ought to use it to embitter us, to make any excuses. But yes, we ought to be able to talk about it. And people understand it just like they understood what happened with the Jews. Just yesterday, I was talking about the Haitians having to pay reparations. And that is not known to a lot of people. The only country, imagine if US, having fought for their independence, had to pay reparations to the British. Haiti had to do that. And a lot of people don't know that. Now, that does not excuse bad people in government, bad leaders, but the realities. And so we deal with the realities and we talk about those realities, but we use it to empower us. And most of all, to show how we overcome. Because as I look at myself, and I always say I was born in a little house, could fit in this building about 6 times. One little room. And of course, and we were joking this morning, these little houses on stilts. So where is the bathroom? An outhouse, you know? But you use these things to show how far you've come, how God has been good, and to show how resilient you are. You know, so I agree with you. We don't use it to make excuses or to embitter us, and not to cause any rifts between races either, because we have to forgive, because we have to understand that whatever happened to us, it was known before, and what does not make you bitter makes you better. In terms of the Me Too movement, I don't think, as I said before, it has really caught on at home as yet, but I believe people are listening to it, and I believe men will learn from it, and women will learn from it. Of course, I'm not there, so I don't know how much they're talking about it. I'm here, but I suspect, given the culture, and these type of things are rampant in probably even more so than the US. But I don't think women would be as vocal about it, but I do think they're paying attention. One of the interesting things, I was listening on the weekend to a young lady who she was talking about a book she had written, Brotopia, about the culture in Silicon Valley. And she said, incidentally, she's a journalist, she thinks the Me Too movement started in Silicon Valley. It didn't start in Silicon Valley. It started with Tarana Brooke. I can't remember, she was a black social worker. I mean, with the young black girls that she encouraged since 2006, of course. So these things happen in our culture, but we don't talk about them as much. And see, when it went to another culture, see, it got the airplay it got. It did not get that kind of airplay within the culture in which it started. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Oh, okay. I spent some time there. I did my final year, an internship there. Yes.
To read from your statement, from 1900s onwards, like 1970s, we saw a rise in Pan-Africanism,
Yes.
this intellectual culture
Yes.
that developed collaboration between Caribbean intellectuals, West African intellectuals, and
Yes.
some developed nations.
Yes.
Now we see issues of climate change,
Mm-hmm.
and building resilience and climate change, and now more than ever kind of behooves us to
Yes.
reinitiate those conversations.
I agree. Yes.
And not just with climate change, but also with cultural development.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bit of stagnation, I find, within the Caribbean community. and lack of collaboration.
Yes.
You know, with regard to that type of development.
Yes.
People speak on that.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And Caribbean, one of the things that I think has helped me is the fact that I played netball and played on a national level. In fact, we were the first little country to beat Trinidad in the Caribbean tournament. But because of netball, I visited. That's why sports to me. I spent so much time in all of the islands, and then I went to UWI. So I went my first to Barbados, Jamaica, and then I did my final 2 years in Trinidad. So I feel totally like a Caribbean person. But I think that is not prevalent enough in our countries. So that connection with each other and with our homeland, Africa, I don't think we have. And I think that, but I do think it's on the rise. And I think things like movies like the Black Panther, I think it is on the rise. I think people like the Vice Chancellor of the University of the West Indies, who is pushing reparations, and not necessarily reparations in terms of paying us any money, but acknowledging there was an issue. And at one point, I didn't like the idea much, but I understand what he's talking about, acknowledging that there was an issue and moving on. But I do think we need, in things like trade, I think we really need to strengthen each other. And we also know, especially in this kind of climate, in the US, I must say, we have to look to strength, like you say, for climate change, because we know that the current administration do not really believe in climate change. Well, having said that, maybe those at the top, but there are a lot of people who do believe in climate change. But it is important to us, those who were born, like I say, as stones throw from the sea, and you could see where they had to build a seawall. It's important to us. And maybe if we are climate refugees, we have to go back to Africa. So, so we do need, for that and many reasons, to strengthen. I think that it died out, for what reason, I'm not sure at that time. People like Black Stallion, under the same, I mentioned Black Stallion, Trinidadian, they pushed that sort of mentality, but it died out. But I think it's on the horizon again, and I think it's important. It's not just from climate change, from travel, just from understanding and relating to people. Understand, because if you don't know who you are, understand who you are, you don't know where you're coming from. I was coming here and I was looking at a name. I was trying to figure out how to pronounce that name. It was a European name, and I said, what am I talking? I don't even know what my name is. Somebody gave. I said, maybe if my real name, my real ancestral name, I wouldn't be able to pronounce it either. So, but I do, while I value that kind of spirit, and I think that's the type of thing we need to understand. We are within our small group and in the larger group as global citizens. I think we need to. Did you want to ask me something at the beginning? Yes.
You mentioned Israel and Jewish people.
Yes.
But when the Jewish people haven't been named,
Mm-hmm.
this is like a struggle and during the flood time,
Yes,
and
yes.
very civilized, mostly civilized in the many
Yes.
Jewish people in history. And I see in the language is the part of the culture,
Mm-hmm.
everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
2,000 years,
Mhm.
hanging by
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
through the bending of the Israel,
Mhm.
and their language and the culture. My question is, how the culture can survive without the land? And maybe it's endangered. I see that many languages dying every year. Right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are thousands of languages, but they are slowly and gradually dying.
Mm-hmm.
One reason may be because of the no land, and
Okay.
especially the bigger countries,
Yeah.
over there are some dominated culture, and then the smaller culture.
Yes.
It's very difficult.
Yes. Yes.
You, how you can explain how can it possible those cultures like where the countries they want to suppress it, culture, the language,
Mhm.
the heritage,
Mhm.
because just it's not sports or food or wearing ears. I'm wearing this one, but culture is what I feel my inside
Mhm.
connection.
Mhm. Yes.
So please tell me how can we, like our language is 5,000-year-old civilization, but we have trade like we are children is going to be die. How can we survive?
I don't know that I can answer your question, but one of the things struck me when you were talking is how I know how can we sing a song in a strange land, and so I understand what you're saying. The land is important, and for us little small countries, I'm from the smallest country in the West, independent country in the Western Hemisphere. 68 square miles and 55,000 persons. But one of the things, and we spoke about the Jews, one of the things they were admonished to do is teach it to your children. And so wherever you are, whether you are landless or not, it is important to pass down these things to your children. And I think that is important, to teach it to your children, you know. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I think